Sirena Beach would make for a much better final stage due to its complicated problem solving and difficult challenges. Incidentally enough, this was actually the last stage I played during my playthrough because I was able to figure out the entrances to Noki Bay and Pianta Village prior to the entrance to Sirena Beach. That being said, I think it's worth addressing that while there is not a required order in this game, as you exit various stages after reaching the shine count threshold, the camera will pan over to the entrance of the stage and push you towards moving in that direction. In my case, since I was grabbing 7 shines in each stage before moving on, I'd find myself running through Isle Delfino and just entering whichever new stage I'd run by. But most players that are just jumping around through the stages and not adamant on completing episode 7 at every stage before moving on will generally go in order the game directs them towards. And they'll probably go after Shadow Mario whenever they exit a stage and see a dramatic camera pan over to him holding something interesting. I don't think this is all that bad in theory. After all, there are only 7 stages in the game and you're required to make it to episode 7 of each stage, so the general design lends itself towards linear progression, which is not a bad thing. My issues lie more along the lines of the difficulty curve and the stage order, which is why I've harped on it a few times throughout each segment. This is of course in contrast to Mario 64, where if you get stuck at a specific star in a stage, you can skip it altogether and more than likely still beat the game without ever returning to that stage unless you're going for full completion. And likewise, you're not necessarily pushed towards going through the stages in a specific order in that game. So the star order and difficulty curve is all very dynamic. A player can basically get through most of the stages in a somewhat adjustable order and just determine through their own ability whether they want to revisit that stage or not. In Sunshine, you will revisit that stage, and you'll have to revisit it prior to beating Bowser. It's not a full completion challenge, it's a requirement whether you like it or not. This is of course in the context of only the first 7 episodes. My point is, while I understand that this game does allow players to jump around between the stages and collect the 49 shines across the stages in whatever order they please, since the game specifically goes out of its way to highlight which stage you just unlocked as you reach a shine threshold, it is intentionally creating a progression system that players are more likely to follow. With that consideration, while I won't completely suggest this game is as linear as Mario 3D World for example, I think it's linear enough where it's worth analyzing certain aspects of its progression like the frequency of early repeated challenges and the difficulty curve and whatnot. These are very much aspects that I think were a detriment to the reputation Mario Sunshine has had throughout the years. Whether or not these aspects are justifiable criticisms is a different story, and I'll be addressing that later on in this retrospective. But I wanted to highlight this now since I think Sirena Beach is actually the hardest stage in the game when you strictly consider the first 7 shines. And I don't necessarily consider it a bad thing. I actually really appreciate the whole haunted hotel perspective of the stage because A, like I've highlighted throughout the previous segments, despite everything in Sunshine being on the same tropical island, they still found ways to make each stage feel like its own unique theme. And B, this feels like the next natural evolution of the Haunted Boo stages that have progressed throughout the past few games. If you consider the Secret Boo stages in World and their puzzle involved in finding secret exits, and the problem-solving trickery involved in Boo's Haunted Mansion in 64, Sunshine having a multi-story haunted hotel with problem-solving and searching spread throughout makes full sense in the context of the evolution of the Mario series. Plus, I think all of the shines in this stage do a pretty good job changing things up a bit, and they offer their fair share of uniqueness and challenges that don't really exist throughout the remainder of the game. Episode 1, for example, is a boss battle known as the Mantis Storm. I've seen this one get a lot of hate, and it's very likely one of the more frustrating shines in the game. The hotel is no longer present, and instead there's electrifying goop where it's meant to stand. When you speak to the hotel manager, or owner I guess, it'll trigger the appearance of the manta rays which remains a part of the surface. It's more like a light cast on the ground than an actual enemy. The electrifying goop in the stage will make you lose health, so you need to avoid it or spray it to create paths for you to walk on. The gimmick with this unique fight is that every time you spray these manta rays they divide into 2. And I believe they have roughly 6 divisions, so by the time they get to their smallest form, there are 64 versions of them swimming around. I don't know if the 64 is meant to be a fun callback, it seems like 128 might have made more sense here, but then again 128 of these might have been way too many. In any case, it's most likely just a coincidence and I'm reaching. But the point is, this could actually prove to be a difficult challenge. I remember the first time I played it, I found it to be tedious, and it took me multiple attempts to succeed. I even failed on my first attempt this time, but my second attempt was bizarrely easy, and I'm not sure if that was a coincidence or not. Instead of waiting for the manta ray to approach me on the platform up top, I instead immediately went on the offensive and sprayed the manta ray from afar while it was still near the shore. For some reason, keeping it in the corner seemed to make it a lot easier. Perhaps changing the behavior so they don't move all around the stage? I'm not sure. As they got smaller, I moved down to the corner of the stage and eventually stood there in the shallow areas of the water when the pieces were at their smallest because at that point they start to swarm you. And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised when I destroyed the last one. I had no idea there were so few remaining. And since I basically cornered myself, it made it easier to focus on them coming from a single direction, which I assume played a big role in the experience. The whole thing took me like 4 or 5 minutes. I didn't want to pull my hair out this time, although on the first attempt when I failed, I think I got pretty close. That being said, I do still think this shine should be considered one of the more obnoxious and frustrating ones, since I remember that's what I found it to be the first time around, and seemingly everyone that discusses this game brings this shine up in the discussion of one of the first ones. So even though I got lucky this time around because I figured out a strategy for it, I'd classify this as one of the more frustrating shines to deal with in the game and will include it in my tally. With that all taken care of, Hotel Delfino rises up from below and you can head into episode 2, the hotel's secret lobby. When you speak to the hotel owner, he'll let you in. The stairs will be blocked off, so your traversal upwards will be tied to spraying the pink boos that will turn into platforms you can jump on. Once you make it to the top floor, you'll see a big old boo statue with its mouth wide open, and inside a dimensional portal that you have to jump into to access the next secret challenge area. This one starts off pretty easily, and heck, it ends easily too, but I've slowly come to realize that really the only challenges in these stages that are genuinely crap are the ones that involve any form of rotation. It's the same reason the Skybird shine in Gelato Beach stunk too. Rotating platforms in this game are just not properly designed and more often than not lead to a failure that just isn't your fault. This rotating segment alone caused me way more game overs than it should have, and it results in me classifying this shine as a shine that'll make me want to pull my hair out. Funny enough, this kind of reminds me of the things they did to improve TikTok Clock from 64 version to DS. One of them was that they got rid of all the triangular platforms in the remake because they realized that controlling Mario in a tight space in 64 was not very intuitive and it took quite some time to get used to. I think the rotating platforms here have a similar issue. Everything else I eventually got comfortable enough to control by this point in the game that it was no longer an issue. But I imagine if they were remaking Sunshine, one of the easiest ways to fix many of the frustrations in this game is to do away with the platforms that rotate. These secret challenges are still fun without them, and still difficult enough, but they wouldn't be as obnoxiously frustrating. But anyway, as per usual, I jumped up and celebrated when I finally got the shine after what felt like the 10th or 11th attempt. Episode 3 is the mysterious Hotel Delfino. This is where it started to really get fun for me. Once again, you speak to the owner or manager of the hotel and he'll let you in. You'll notice a Yoshi egg that wants pineapples, but unfortunately that's the one fruit they don't have at the stand. If you go upstairs, all of the doors will be locked, so you have to search everywhere. And really, the only suspicious thing of note is the existence of these 2 bathrooms. I think it's a bit funny that they covered the toilet in brown goop, but I'm also a man-child. In the men's room, you'll notice a bit of water streaks near the last stall, and it'll look out of place. The hope is that if you look around enough you can't find anything else, and that streak of water should intrigue you to investigate. And sure enough, a kick off the wall takes you upstairs into one of the rooms. If you leave and head back into the lobby, you'll basically have to head back downstairs and start it all over since the doors will still be locked. But if you go back to that same room and notice the Pianta staring into a painting, you might pick up on the slightest hint of an outline of a boo. If you spray it enough, you'll be able to jump into the painting. At this point, the idea should be a bit clearer. You have to advance through the rooms to figure this all out. You'll spray some closet doors with terrible physics to make them all have a blue silhouette and it'll open it up. You'll use some pink boos to enter a ceiling shaft, you'll spray a bookshelf that'll make space for you, and eventually you'll ground pound a discolored floor panel which will lead you to a room that has pineapples. There's your target. Grab the pineapple, head downstairs, and you'll be able to continue along with your rideable buddy. When you head all the way upstairs, you'll see a shine behind the glass walls above the swimming pool. There's a single room you can enter just on the other side of the pool, and the camera will pan to a ceiling tile you can jump through if you bounce on the bed. I didn't realize this initially, but the whole point of Yoshi here is that he can eat the big sleeping boos that are blocking the way. There are 4 or 5 points along this ceiling duct maze, or attic or whatever it is, that a ground pound will send you through. So you need to use Yoshi to clear the sleeping ghost out of the way and look around until you find the right cracked ceiling panel to ground pound through, and you'll be able to pick up your shine. Is this particularly hard? No, but it is long and it does require a lot of searching and experimentation. There will be moments you'll have to redo a lot of the same steps that you just took because you lost Yoshi or accidentally exited a door that locks you out. The puzzle when you enter the bathroom alone could take you a while to figure out. There's a lot of problem solving here, but I think it's a better shine for it. I wouldn't consider this frustrating, but I would guess it's not a shine most people enjoy per se. But seeing as how in the base game, primarily those first 49 shines, is void of search and puzzle solving shines, I think this one was very welcome, and I'd reiterate that if this was the final stage a player was going through, it'd be a solid endgame challenge. I will not be counting this as a frustrating shine. I think it's a very good and memorable challenge for players to undergo, even if it's a bit on the longer end. This next one is not getting any praise though. The Secret of the Casino. So if you've gone around speaking to the NPCs, you'll find a Pianta in the corner that ushers you into the casino. There are a handful of games spread throughout. You need to make it land on 3 sevens. I also didn't realize that if you only spray a single wheel on the slots, it'll keep the other two stagnant. So when I landed on the 7s, I just kept redoing it, so part of the annoyance is probably my fault. But anyway, this slot was the least of my concerns. After you get the 7s, there will be a wall of question mark panels that have the same gimmicky physics as the closet doors in the previous Shine. Except instead of just 4 panels, it's 16. And due to how spectacularly inconsistent the physics and the player's aim in this game are, this'll be a pain in the butt. It's all random, and it's very frustrating to screw up and have a stray water bullet completely force you to start over because a single panel on the third column of the 3rd row flipped, and in order to spray that, you're going to have to make all of the other panels in the area flip as well. This is not fun by any means. A player will most likely eventually get it, but this is 100% a pulling out your hair worth frustrating shrine. And we haven't even gotten to the actual secret challenge yet. Thankfully, the secret challenge is actually not all that bad anyway. You just have to be careful about how you traverse and not bum rush it, and you should be good. There's even one up in a fairly easy to reach location. Naturally, the 2 points that I felt that gave me the most concern were these 2 rotating curbs, but they weren't nearly as jarring as the previous challenges. Next up is the boss fight against King Boo. Once again, you speak to the hotel owner, and he'll mention the casino a few times, so you'll hopefully head in that direction to see what the deal is. And you'll see the only purple color on there and hopefully ground pound it, which will take you down to the boss battle. Another unique one, and pretty fun one I might add. You do a lot of waiting and dodging here, and a good chunk of it is left up to luck, so I can see why some might not enjoy this as much as I do, but I think the goofy looking King Boo, the absurdity of the environment, and the minor challenge it provides alone make this a very fun and memorable one. King Boo will be spinning roulette wheels, and you want it to land on the fruits when you spray him. He might also send out a bunch of enemies or obstacles in general, but it's pretty easy to overcome. You need to grab a red chili pepper, launch it at his tongue, and when he starts to go nuts, you grab another fruit and throw it at him to hurt him. Do this a couple more times, and you'll get the shine. Next is the time limit scrub of Sirena Beach. Basically, you need to spray away all of the goop in 3 minutes. To help you, there are barrels of water you can launch at the goop to remove large chunks of it. I think this is a good challenge because either a player will be comfortable enough with Mario's movements by now to be able to handle it, or it'll serve as a limit test to get players up to speed and make them more comfortable with their control of Flood and Mario going into the endgame. I didn't really make any tactics, I barely even used the water barrels, I just flipped around and sprayed at my heart's content. And I finished with 25 seconds to spare. It's a fun time challenge and a shine that I enjoyed. And finally, Shadow Mario. He's in the hotel, so you'll have to chase him up the stairs and watch how he jumps off the walls to avoid you. To add a bit of uniqueness, there'll be ghosts that'll camouflage and look just like Shadow Mario as well. But as long as you keep a good eye on him, this one will be about as easy as the rest of them were. This was the longest a stage took me to get 7 shines in. By the time I wrapped it up, I felt like I was ready for the climax of the game more so than when I finished the remaining 2 stages that I'll be covering next. There was a lot I enjoyed about the difficulty here, even if it did have 3 separate shines that I would say are just about too frustratingly difficult, and would make a player want to pull their hair out. But in the context of a late game stage, I think that's acceptable, even if you could clean it up a bit in a theoretical remake. But that's enough of that for now, because we're not done yet. Next, we'll head over to the serene waters of Noki Bay.